Why Nation Fail by Acemoglu and Robinson. Chapter 7 The Turning Point. Trouble with Stockings. The authors explain how a political revolution in 1688 changed institutions in England and led to the Industrial Revolution. The authors continue with the turning point, the fear of stockings. The turning point, the fear of stockings. William Lee's knitting machine, a stocking frame designed to prevent copying, faced opposition from Queen Elizabeth I and James I due to fears of unemployment and political instability. The fear of becoming political losers led to the lack of sustained increase in living standards between the Neolithic and Industrial revolutions. The elite, especially when their political power is threatened, often resist and try to stop such innovations. Historical overview of extractive institutions in 17th century England. Extractive institutions were the norm in history, generating economic growth when inclusive elements were present. These institutions did not allow for creative destruction, leading to unsustainable growth. The life expectancy of residents in Natufian villages and ancient Rome was similar to an average inhabitant of England in the 17th century. The Diocletian Edict on Maximum Prices set out a schedule of wages for various workers. Political conflict in England's history. The Magna Carta and the first elected Parliament marked England's first step towards pluralism. The first elected Parliament in 1265 further constrained the power of the monarchy. The War of the Roses ended the intra-elite conflict, leading to political centralization. Political institutions and societies changes in the 16th century. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 led to a shift in political power from the king to the lords and from the elite to the people. The Tudors and Stuart dynasty inherited and sustained extractive political and economic institutions. The conflict between James I and Parliament arose in the 1620s, centered on control of trade both overseas and within the British Isles. Charles I's absolutist regime and the Glorious Revolution. Charles I's absolutist regime. Charles I, who ascended to the throne in 1625, intensified his absolutist regime. He induced forced loans, created monopolies, and undermined the independence of the judiciary. He levied fines and charges, including ship money, imposed annually until 1640. Charles I's absolutist behavior and extraction policies. His absolutist behavior and extractive policies led to resentment and resistance in England. In 1640, Charles faced conflict with Scotland, forcing Parliament to demand more taxes. The Civil War broke out in 1642 between Charles and Parliament, despite many in Parliament supporting the Crown. The Roundheads defeated the Royalists, known as Cavaliers. Charles was tried and executed in 1649, but his defeat did not result in inclusive institutions. The monarchy was restored in 1660 and many privileges were restored. Charles II's absolutism. Charles II's attempt to establish absolutism in England intensified by his brother James II. In 1688, Parliament invited William of Orange and his wife Mary to replace James. The Glorious Revolution and the new Constitution. After the Glorious Revolution, Parliament and William negotiated a new constitution. The Declaration of Rights established central constitutional principles, but was vague. The triumph/achievement of Parliament. The changes represented the triumph of Parliament over the king, ending absolutism in England and Great Britain. Parliament had a strong stake in enforcing property rights and opposing greater taxes and strengthening state power. The emergence of pluralism. The English people had access to Parliament and the policy and economic institutions made in Parliament. However, England was far from a democracy, with less than 2% of the population voting in the 18th century. Impact of monopolies on English economic institutions. Monopolies and the Statute of Monopolies. Monopolies were a significant part of extractive economic institutions in the 17th century. The Statute of Monopolies in 1623 attacked domestic monopolies, leading to the English Civil War. The Long Parliament abolished domestic monopolies but maintained the ability to grant overseas monopolies. The Royal African Company. In 1689, the company seized the cargo of an interloper, Nightingale, who sued the company for illegal seizure of goods. Chief Justice Holt ruled that monopoly privileges could only be created by statute, and this had to be done by Parliament. Parliament's response to monopolies. After 1688, Parliament had to decide what to do with the monopoly, leading to numerous petitions demanding its demise. The interlopers framed their opposition in terms of national interest, leading to a significant increase in petitions. Key changes in economic institutions and government policy. Parliament began a process of reform in economic institutions to promote manufacturing, rather than taxing and impeding it. The hearth tax was abolished in 1689, and Parliament moved to start taxing land. Acts and legislations were passed to expand the market and profitability of woolen textiles. Finance reforms. The creation of the Bank of England in 1694 paved the way for a more extensive financial revolution. The Glorious Revolution and political centralization. The Glorious Revolution transformed English political institutions, making them more pluralistic and laying the foundations for inclusive economic institutions. The state started expanding, with expenditures reaching around 10% of national income. Political centralization and state functioning in England. After 1688, Parliament began to improve revenue raising through taxation, illustrated by the expansion of the excise tax bureaucracy. Post-1688, the state began to rely more on talent and less on political appointments, developing a powerful infrastructure to run the country. The Industrial Revolution in England. The Industrial Revolution led to significant improvements in transportation, metallurgy, and steam power. The most significant innovation was the mechanization of textile production and the development of factories for these manufactured textiles. The Industrial Revolution was about a fundamental reorganization of economic institutions in favor of innovators and entrepreneurs, based on the emergence of more secure and efficient property rights. Influence of India and China on England's textile industry. Introduction of India and China. In 1688, India, calicoes, and muslins were significant imports into England. The East India Company was under attack after 1688, leading to a demand for more competition from cheap Indian textiles. Protection measures by the wool industry. The wool industry promoted the sumptuary laws in the 1660s to protect itself economically and politically. The wool industry lobbied Parliament to pass legislation in 1666 and 1678 to ban burial in anything other than a woolen shroud. Post-1688 changes. Woolen manufacturers from East Anglia and the West Country allied with silk weavers to restrict imports. The coalition presented bills to Parliament to place restrictions on the wearing of Asian cottons and silks, and the dyeing and printing of Asian textiles in England. In 1701, Parliament passed an act to discourage the manufacture of Asian textiles. The Calico Act of 1721 closed these loopholes, but left an active domestic cotton and linen industry competing against the woolens. The Manchester Act of 1736. The Act of 1736 agreed that great quantities of linen yarn and cotton wool have been manufactured, printed, and painted within the Kingdom of Great Britain. The Act also facilitated England's monopolization of international trade, primarily by the private sector. Impact of the Navigation Acts. The Navigation Acts, passed in 1651, aimed to facilitate England's monopolization of international trade. This advantage for English traders and manufacturers increased their profits and may have encouraged innovation in new and highly profitable activities. England's political and economic changes. Long-term repression was not a solution to England's economic and political changes. The Peterloo massacre and the 1830 revolution in France sparked wider social unrest. The first Reform Act in 1832 enfranchised Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, and Sheffield, broadening voting bases. The repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846 led to the redistribution of income and political power. The Industrial Revolution in England, a case study of inclusive economic institutions. The Industrial Revolution in England was facilitated by inclusive economic institutions built on the foundations of the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution strengthened property rights, improved financial markets, and removed barriers to industry expansion. The emergence of a new regime based on constitutional rule and pluralism was prompted by the shift in English institutions. Power dynamics in the Middle Ages. The expansion of trade opportunities in the Americas and economic development of the colonies influenced the balance of power in the struggle against Stuart absolutism. The emergence and empowerment of diverse interests created a broad coalition against Stuart absolutism. The formation of the Whig Party in the 1670s further strengthened this coalition, underpinning pluralism following the Glorious Revolution. Emergence of pluralism and inclusive regimes. The emergence of pluralistic regime was influenced by history's contingent path. The English Civil War led to a coalition victory against Stuarts, but it did not guarantee absolutism defeat. Thank you.